Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Case For. I'm your host, Matt Campobasso. Today, I want to start with a story that has been living rent-free in my head for years, specifically since I read the book Upstream by Dan Heath. In fact, Dan opens his book with this story. So there's two fishermen sitting on a riverbank. It's a quiet morning. Their lines are in the water. Life is good. And then they see a kid floating down the middle of the river, arms flailing, barely above water. They immediately drop their fishing poles. They jump in, they swim out, they grab the kid, drag him back to shore, and he's saved. The fishermen are breathing hard, they're dripping wet, and they look at each other like, what just happened? But they walk back to their spots, they sit down, and they try to reset. And then they see another kid floating down the river. Jump in, same thing, swim out, save him, back on shore, sit down. Then it happens again, and again, and then again. But this time, as the fifth kid is floating down the river, one fisherman jumps in, swims out, grabs the kid, turns to look for his buddy, and his buddy's not there. He's running up the riverbank. So the fisherman in the water screams, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the other fisherman yells back, "I'm going to go find the guy who's throwing these kids into the river." As I mentioned, that's how Dan Heath opens Upstream. And even though I read it years ago, that idea, that concept, has never really left me. And so, if you find yourself dealing with the same problem over and over, at home, at work, in your own head, thinking to yourself, why does this keep happening to me? Well, then this episode is for you. Because while fixing things is important, preventing them is freedom. And that's why after this, I'll be making the case for thinking upstream. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in plain English, thinking upstream, it's simple. It's the difference between being great at putting fires out and building a world where fewer fires start in the first place. I've been using this concept of upstream thinking with the legal teams that I've led for the last 6 years. I tell them everybody celebrates the firefighter who runs into the blazing house and puts out the fire. And there is bravery in that, and valor. We absolutely need firefighters. And we all have to become those people sometimes. But what you don't think about in that moment is that when the fire is out, the house, it's still in shambles. And what I encourage my teams to think about, and what I respect at a different level, is the electrician who installs safe, reliable wiring so that fire never starts in the first place. There's no parade for that person. There's no headline, there's no applause, just damage avoided, chaos prevented, focus preserved. And that's the question that I want to put into the center of the room today. What would change in your life, personally and professionally, if you had fewer preventable emergencies pulling your focus and wearing you down day after day? Because upstream thinking is not a productivity trick. It's not do more. It's stop the bleeding. It's stop repeating. It's stop living like the sixth kid is always floating toward you and all you can do is react. All right, if this were a courtroom, here's how we'd do it. I'd give an opening statement, which I just did, and then we'd walk through the evidence, exhibit by exhibit, so the case can stand on something real. So now I want to do that. Exhibit A. Downstream celebrates the hero. Upstream rewards the architect. Downstream work gets rewarded loudly. Upstream work gets rewarded quietly. Downstream is the save, the rescue, sprint, late night fix, I'll handle this moment. And you know why we like that downstream? Because it makes you feel useful. It makes you feel needed. It makes you feel important. Upstream is different. Upstream is the checklist you built before the plane takes off, the process you designed so someone else doesn't have to guess, the training you run so people stop stepping on that same rake, and the guardrails you built so the business can move faster without crashing. Upstream work is what prevents drama. And the reason this matters, especially for leaders, is that downstream heroics, reactivity, it doesn't scale. It creates dependency. It teaches an organization, don't learn lessons, just deal with the problem when it arises. Upstream builds capability. It teaches an organization, we learn, we improve, we don't repeat. And the truth is, a lot of companies have a lot of firefighters. What they're short on is electricians. With that, I'd like to move Exhibit A into evidence. Exhibit B. Every fire that repeats is information. When something is happening, life is giving you data. And instead of treating that like bad luck and thinking, here we go again, upstream thinking treats it like a signal. What is the system producing this outcome? Because systems produce outcomes. People respond to incentives. Habits repeat. Confusion creates friction. Lack of clarity creates mistakes. At my last company, which was publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, I ran a legal team of 10 lawyers around the globe. And one of the things that we did that was most upstream wasn't being smarter lawyers. It was reducing preventable risk by building patterns into the organization. For example, we didn't want to be the last stop when somebody was already in trouble. That's downstream, that's reactive, that's firefighting. We wanted legal to be a resource upstream. Before the decision hardened, before the commitment was made, before the risk became expensive. So we built playbooks, we did training, we created templates, we clarified who had the right to make certain decisions. And one of my favorite upstream moves, we trained the broader business, about 1,300 people, on issue spotting. Not so they could become lawyers, that's not the goal, but so they could recognize this feels like we're making a commitment. This feels like it might create a regulatory issue. This might change our risk profile. There might be privacy issues at play, or this might have downstream consequences we should think about. And when you have your people thinking like that, that's upstream. Because when you teach a company to spot issues early, you prevent expensive surprises later. You preserve velocity, you reduce chaos, you avoid the kind of problems that can cost millions or tens of millions because nobody saw it coming until it was already on fire. And I'm saying that as someone who has lived it. If you wait until legal is reacting, you are already paying a tax. Upstream reduces that tax. And with that, I'd like to move Exhibit B into evidence. Exhibit C. Upstream thinking is a leadership move because it makes speed sustainable. Some organizations feel fast, but they're actually just chaotic. Yes, they're sprinting, but they're sprinting into walls. They're constantly recovering, always cleaning up, always explaining, always clarifying. True velocity is not adrenaline, it's repeatability. And I was lucky in my prior role because the CEO that I worked for, he understood this. He didn't need me to be a walking encyclopedia who could whip out an answer to a legal question in 60 seconds. He needed me and my team to listen, to identify what mattered, to spot the risk, and come back with a plan that weighed the trade-offs and let the business move forward with efficiency. That's range, that's judgment, and that's architecture. Upstream thinking doesn't mean you move slowly. It means you move deliberately. So you don't have to keep redoing the same work, relitigating the same decisions, and refixing the same mistakes. With that, I'd like to move Exhibit C into evidence. Now I want to take this out of the corporate world for a moment, because upstream thinking isn't just business related. Exhibit D, upstream parenting is love with a long time horizon. As a dad of 3, I think about the world that they're growing up in, and I think about how much of their lives can be captured, clipped, misunderstood, and replayed forever. And I know this. None of us want the world to judge our kids based on one bad moment. We want context, we want compassion, we want people to assume there's a full story. Upstream parenting is how you give your kids more full story moments. It's fewer repeated battles and more pre-built guardrails. It's not just fixing what they did that day, it's helping them think about how to handle it the next time they're in that same situation. Because that's the secret. Parenting is not just about raising kids, it's about building adults. Here's a concrete example from my own life. In 2026, I am making it a point to teach my kids real fiscal responsibility. Not with lectures, not with long, drawn-out conversations where I tell them war stories from my life, because I'd rather eat glass, and I'm pretty sure they would too. What I'm doing is I'm using week-to-week, age-appropriate games and tasks. Why? Well, because I didn't really learn money skills in childhood. I've learned a lot of that the hard way, and the concept of compound interest is a perfect example. I heard that phrase as a teenager. I did not understand it. Not emotionally, not practically. I understood the mathematics, but I didn't understand the future value that could be realized by me if I employed those concepts. I didn't change my behavior. So what I'm trying to do is give my kids the gift of understanding money earlier. Money in, money out, spending decisions, delayed gratification, how does interest work, and why small habits compound into big outcomes. And my hope isn't that they become perfect with money. It's that they don't have to pay full price for the same lessons that I did. And that's not controlling them, that's equipping them. That's thinking upstream outside of myself. And with that, I'd like to move Exhibit D into evidence. Exhibit E. Upstream is not perfection. You don't do it once and set it aside like a home project. It's fewer preventable fires over time. It's going from 5 alarm fires to 2 alarm fires to little sparks you notice early and step on before they spread. Upstream is a habit. It's noticing, it's naming, redesigning, and then repeating. And once you start doing that, something shifts. You begin to feel less like life is happening to you and more like you're building a life that's harder to derail. With that, I'd like to move Exhibit E into evidence. All right, the evidence is in. And if this were a real trial, there would be an opposing counsel here, and he or she would stand up throughout my case and try to poke holes. So let's do that, because a good case should survive pressure. Objection 1. This upstream stuff sounds great in theory, but we don't have time for all that. And that's probably the most common objection because emotionally, it's the most true in the moment. When the day-to-day is busy, when your inbox is on fire, when people are calling, when your kid needs something, your brain says, I can't think upstream right now. I just need to fix this so I can get back to my day. But here's my rebuttal. That mindset is exactly how you get stuck in that river. Upstream thinking is not a luxury. It's a flywheel. The first few upstream investments, they feel slow. They feel invisible. They feel like you're doing extra work. But over time, I promise you, they buy you that time back. Because the more you invest now, the fewer avoidable fires you have later. And once that starts working, like the interest I wish I'd known about in my teens, it compounds. You put out fewer fires, you have more bandwidth, you build more upstream systems, and then you put out even fewer fires. That's the flywheel. So yes, upstream can feel slower in the moment, but downstream guarantees you stay busy forever. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to overrule that objection. And yes, I recognize that it's not exactly fair that I get to rule on objections to my own case, but you do what you can with what you've got. Objection number 2, some fires are unavoidable. Absolutely true. Life happens, markets shift, people make mistakes, kids are kids, weather exists, surprises are part of the deal. But here's the important part. Most organizations and most people treat avoidable fires as unavoidable. They accept this is just how it is, when it's really, this is how it is now because we haven't redesigned yet. The goal is not 0 fires. The goal is fewer repeat fires and faster learning from the ones that do break out. So we're not trying to eliminate uncertainty. We're trying to eliminate unnecessary chaos. So I'm going to sustain this objection in part. Some fires do happen, but we're not talking about those. We're talking about the ones you keep relighting. Now that we've addressed objections, I'd like to make my closing argument. Ladies and gentlemen, thinking upstream is how you stop confusing crisis response with leadership. It's how you stop getting addicted to the identity of being the fixer. It's how you stop living like your value is measured by how many emergencies you can survive. Because the truth is, downstream heroics, they feel great, but they keep you trapped. Upstream work, it feels quiet, but it sets you free. And if you take one line from today's episode, let it be this: fix it fast if you must, but redesign slowly on purpose. Don't just slap a Band-Aid on it and sprint to the next fire. Step back, ask what caused it, figure out the pattern underneath, ask what guardrail could prevent it, and ask what you can teach your team, your kids, your company, yourself. So the next time, the cost is less. Because upstream is like growing a field of crops. The first thing you do is you prepare the soil, then you plant the seeds, and then, this is the hard part, you let time do its thing. There's no parade, there's no applause, just a better harvest later. All right, let's move out of the courtroom and into the real world and make these ideas practical. These micro tools are small enough to use in real life: work life, parent life, human life. Micro tool number 1, the repeat offender list. This week, I want you to write down 3 problems that you've solved more than twice. Not the problems that happened once, the ones that keep coming back. And I want you to look at the list and say, okay, which one of these is actually a pattern? Because that list isn't annoying, it's not a curse, it's your upstream roadmap. Micro tool number 2, the 10-minute prevention meeting. 10 minutes once a week. Sit down, look around, whether it's work, parenting, a relationship, your life. Ask yourself, what broke? Then ask yourself, why did it break? Finally, ask yourself, what do we change so it doesn't break the same way again? That's it. It's not a postmortem that takes 2 hours. It's a prevention habit. Micro tool number 3. Before you hit go on something important, a project, a deal, an initiative, a conversation, ask yourself, if this thing that I'm about to do goes sideways, where does it go sideways first? Then ask yourself, what is the simplest guardrail that I could put in place that would make that less likely? That question alone can save you a lot of downstream pain. Micro tool number 4, and this one's for the parents. The next time your child does something that triggers you, first, obviously handle the situation in the moment. But then later, when it's calm, ask yourself, what do I want them to say to themselves the next time this happens? And then teach them that. Not a lecture, but a script or a principle, a way to think. That's upstream parenting. That's love with a long time horizon. Before you go, I'll leave you with this. If you're always downstream, you will always feel behind. If your week feels like you're sprinting from one avoidable emergency to the next, that's not bad luck. That's data. And you don't have to keep living in that river. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not jumping in again. It's walking upstream and changing the system. So, fix it fast if you must, but redesign slowly and on purpose. And if this episode reached you or made you think, or you think it might help someone else, I would love for you to help me spread it. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, share it with someone who's always in firefighter mode, and if you post a clip or a thought, tag it with #TheCase4. Thanks for listening. And remember, whatever your case is, don't be afraid to build it and carry it out into the real world.